Come on a journey with a cinephile.
Wake up, sucker. We're thieves and we're bad guys. That's exactly what we are.
We was getting too big for our britches.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
What have you done to its eyes?
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains in.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Biddy well, little brother. Biddy well.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to episode 267 of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. As always, I'm your tour guide here of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So on this episode here for you is going to be another of my winter year-end double feature things that I'm doing here. This is going to be number 24 of those. The two I'm going to pair up. I was originally going to do one of the mini reviews as a featured, but I ended up going to see Y2K. This is a 2024 release in the theater, and I actually had a lot of fun with it. And I think it actually pairs up very well with Decoys, as we have two teen comedy horror films, one of them taking place in high school, right there at the tail end of it, and the other one taking place in college, so I thought that, fit together perfectly. Then I gave a watch to Salem's Lot. This is the new one that came out here in 2024, and then my 1944 watch is going to be The Tower of the Seven Hunchbacks. That has a wild title there. Then my Friday the Fours rewatch is going to be Club Dread. This is from 2004. I gave a rewatch as well to Strange Darling. This is a new release that I got to sneak in there just so I could, keep getting those rewatches in. And then with the Friday the 13th being, last week here, I did Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. And then I also have a documentary here of Dario Argento's World of Horror. So I don't think there's anything else I need to do here for this intro outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me. And for my first mini review here is actually one that I thought was going to be a featured review, but I end up shifting, and that's going to be Salem's Lot. This is from 2024. It was written and directed by Gary Dauberman. This stars Lewis Pullman, Mackenzie Lee, and Jordan Preston Carter. This is a vampire horror thriller film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 5.6 on IMDb and a 2.4 on Letterboxd, with the synopsis being: an author returns to his hometown of Jerusalem's Lot in search of inspiration for his next book, only to discover that the townspeople are being attacked by an unspeakable force. So this is one that intrigued me when I first heard that it was being made. I'll be honest, I didn't have high hopes after learning that this was made years ago and then shelved. It came out to HBO Max this year. Now I'm leery since this is my second favorite novel from Stephen King. Tobe Hooper did a great job at capturing that feel and looking for the look they needed for that adaptation. So that one was a mini series and then there's also it came out as like a movie as well, but then there was a mini series with Rob Lowe that also kind of fell short. So I still wanted to give this one a chance, as you can tell, since I did watch this one here. And where I want to start is that this, to me, it's not horrible. I fall in line with some others that have seemed to think it's an unnecessary remake. I was chatting with a buddy about how it would be better to just do kind of like a standalone vampire movie because of what the creature is in this film, since it doesn't capture the heart of what makes the King novel work so well. There are more underlying issues in this town that this version alludes to, but it doesn't flesh out that atmosphere. Now, I have come off as negative, but this isn't bad. This is just more generic, unfortunately. The Hooper and the Lowe miniseries series had made more time to develop these elements. They condense everything here into under a 2-hour runtime, which is impressive. It just feels forced and loses that subtlety that makes this work. I'm not going to spend this whole review, comparing this to other versions, as that's not fair. I just needed to include that here. This does work in the respect that you don't waste time getting into the story. The vampire attacks are almost immediate, and I think they do good with that and the set pieces that we get along with it, especially because this one incorporates this drive-in movie theater that I thought was kind of cool. Let's then shift over to filmmaking. This has a great cinematography and editing. There are transitions that I thought were expertly done. I'd even go as far to say that we're almost getting an art house feel there. That is something I'll give credit to. I'll also say that the look of the vampires was solid. The glowing eyes were great. My only nitpick there is I don't love the fangs of Barlow, the head vampire. I'm glad that they stuck with the more rat-like or feral-looking vampire like you'd get in Nosferatu. There's a gimmick here that when you have faith and your cross is working, it glows. That was fine. I'll also credit the framing. The soundtrack fits without necessarily standing out. I think then let's finish out my thoughts here on the story. And there's a social commentary here that feels like it was kind of dumped and instead of being fleshed out. So the whole thing here is we have Ben Mears, who's the author, portrayed by Lewis Pullman, who has come back to this town. So there's this Marston House, is a creepy building that overlooks the city. It is supposed to attract evil. There is this idea here that Jerusalem's Lot is a dead town and that Barlow is just kind of finishing it off. This is something that's actually said by the sheriff here, who is portrayed by William Sadler, great little character actor there. We don't get much about the death of the small town in the 1970s aside from that, so I get the vibe that you're supposed to just take the film at its word. More could be fleshed out there. So let's then go ahead and just kind of talk about the acting performances. Pullman is fine as our lead. He has a good look for it, but he kind of fades into the background for me. It doesn't bode well as our hero. Then I would say Mackenzie Lee as Susan Norton. She is attractive, and I don't know if they give her a lot to work with outside of that, though. I thought Jordan Preston Carter was solid here as the Mark Petrie character. He's kind of like our horror movie character since he knows so much. I'm always a fan of those people. I thought Elfrey Woodard and Bill Camp are solid as Dr. Cody and Matt Burke, respectively. They're kind of this, rounding out this circle here to help save the town. Then we also have John Benjamin Hickey as Father Callahan. He's some interesting elements. They just don't give him enough screen time to develop it. I would also give credit here to Spencer Treat Clark. I've already said Sadler. And then the rest of the cast were fine for what was needed. Now, it's kind of interesting here is that we have Pilo Asbeck is R.T. Straker in this one. My problem here is it feels like he's impersonating James Mason, and it just kind of comes off as weird. And I also give credit here to Alexander Ward, who is taking on the Barlow character. In conclusion, this is one that I feel like there could be more here, but it just kind of falls flat. The setting is solid along with the set pieces and having the vampires attack. My problem is that I just don't know if more could be fleshed out. Condensed it under 2 hours hurts. It isn't fair to compare it to the other versions, but there are elements here that are introduced and not fleshed out, so that's where my critique comes from. The acting is fine, but doesn't stand out. There are some good artistic things done with the cinematography, editing, and framing that I'll give credit for. I do think this is worth a watch despite my problems with this as well. So my rating here for Salem's Lot 2024 is going to be a 6 out of 10. And for my next mini review here is going to be The Tower of Seven Hunchbacks. It goes by the original title of La Torre de los Siete Jorobados. Now, this is from 1944. It was directed by Edgar Neville, who co-wrote this, as well as helped do the dialogue with Jose Sanatuini. And then this also is from the novel by Emilio Carrera. This is starring Antonio Casal, Isabel de Pomes, and Guillermo Marin. This is a comedy, fantasy, horror, thriller film that is from Spain, currently sitting on a 6.9 on IMDb. Nice. And a 3.5 on Letterboxd, or synopsis being, in 19th century Madrid, a young man plays roulette. A mysterious character helps him win. Basilio is the only one who can see him. In return, the Spectre asks for his help to proving what happened to him. So say that character here that I named is going to be portrayed by Casil. Now, this is a film that I found when searching for horror from 1944. Seeing that this was from Spain intrigued me, as I'm always curious about this genre from other countries in general, especially when you're going to more in the past. Now, for this one, I thought I found it on YouTube. There's a couple different videos that were on there, but it didn't have English subs. But there's another site that I found streaming that allowed me to understand what was going on here because they did have those subtitles that I was looking for. So then for this one here, where I'm going to start is that I'm not sure if I fully understood everything that I was seeing, and I don't even know if I would consider this to be horror. Being that the era that it's from, it makes sense as to why this is classified in the genre. That doesn't mean that I don't enjoy what we got here. It's just an odd journey for sure. So I'm going to start as our lead character here, Basilio. We learn from the opening sequence that he's superstitious. He was asked questions during a musical performance done by the La Bella Medusa, portrayed by Manolita Moran. Now, what's interesting here is that He's been trying to ask her out to dinner. She finally agrees to, but her mother is going to be joining them, and she is portrayed by Julia Lejos. So then after that, we end up seeing interactions here with Basilio with the character of Don Robinson de Mantua, portrayed by Felix de Pomes. Now, what's interesting there is that, it's actually the father to Isabel, I'm guessing here, who is Ennis. That's his daughter. Anyways, though, but I thought this was a good setup here as he sees Professor Mantua, and they do enough here to show that nobody else does, only he can. This does get repeated a bit too much, but it's also a different time. But then Basilio is a timid man, and we see growth to where he ends up. I appreciate that. He leads the investigation into what was discovered within these different buildings and how it leads to a major plot point. I wasn't expecting it to go there. It was definitely interesting, though. I'll say that Casals works as his lead character here. I love how he plays it and the growth to where he ends up. Now, I'm not going to spoil the story despite it being 80 plus years old, but I will say is that this goes to grander than I was expecting. The title made me chuckle, and how it factors in was something that I wasn't expecting either. We have a simple story of solving this murder that happened into, incorporating in old dark house elements with secret tunnels and passages. There's even an ancient structure. How the Hunchbacks factored in was weird there throughout, and even a moment where Basilios rubs his chip before gambling on one for luck, that felt derogatory. He's superstitious though, so I get it. Now, I know this is based on a novel. It might be too ambitious for what they try to do, but I'll still give it credit. So I'm going to stick with the idea and discuss filmmaking. The cinematography and framing were good. I love capturing Madrid. We also see how these buildings are. Then revealing what was in them and using the old dark house stuff makes me smile. This even goes into ancient secrets where the tunnels lead. How good that looks and how it ends was good as well. We don't get much in the way of effects. What we did get were practical in-camera or models, which adds charm. Other than that, the soundtrack fit for what was needed. All it's out there to be acting. I've already said that Casillas was good as our lead. The Pomus is solid as his counterpart, and that would be Isabella as Enos. It's kind of interesting there is that Basilios goes on a date with Medusa and her mother before meeting Ennis. He tries to protect her the more he learns about this plot. An interesting character here is Guillermo Marin portraying Dr. Sabatino. Seems kind of insignificant at first, and as things go on, it reveals more. I'll say that other than, going there is that Felix de Pomes looks good. I thought that he'd be in this more, but he's more of a catalyst to start this investigation. Other than that, I would give credit here to Maureen, Antonio Riquelme, Moran, Lajos. I think everybody here kind of just rounded us out for what was needed. In conclusion, this is a movie that went into a direction that I wasn't expecting. Not necessarily a horror film, but we do have our lead character seeing ghosts that helps with this investigation. There are interesting story elements like this old dark couch, which I love, and an interesting reveal under the city of Madrid. The acting here is solid. I would say they are being led by Casillas and the De Pomes. And this was made well enough with the cinematography and framing, capturing what they needed there. There are limited effects, and they're done practically, which is a positive. Not one that I can recommend to everybody unless you're a fan of earlier cinema. Even then, this is more of someone diving deeper into horror or to see the history of this genre from Spain. So my rating here for the Tower of Seven Hunchbacks is going to be a 6.5 out of 10. And for my next mini review here is going to be one that I've seen a couple of times throughout the years, and that is going to be Club Dread. This is from 2004. Now, this actually is directed by J. Sandra Shakar, who also helped write this with Kevin Hernanen, Steve Lemmy, Paul Soter, and Eric Stolhansky. Now, these are the Broken Lizard guys, if you didn't know that offhand. So this stars Chandra Sekhar, Bill Paxton, and Heffernan. So this is actually a parody, satire, slasher, comedy, horror, mystery, thriller film that is from a co-production of the United States and Mexico. Currently sitting on a 5.7 on IMDb and a 2.7 on Letterboxd with our synopsis. When a serial killer interrupts the fun at the swanky Coconut Pete's Beach Resort, a hedonistic island paradise for swingers, it's up to the club staff to stop the violence or at least hide it. So this one, actually, I should say here, Coconut Pete is a variation on Jimmy Buffett, who is portrayed by Paxton. And I actually checked this one out, I believe, when I was in college, because I was a fan of the Broken Lizard's earlier film, Super Troopers. I'll admit that the first time I wasn't the biggest fan of horror comedies, but this is one that I've been meaning to revisit. I do know that this would be one that was also on the movie channel, so I'd watch part of it here and there whenever I would just kind of jump in, because I did know that there were some, nudity as well as some horror stuff. So I've now given it a second watch here with a critical eye for my foray through the fours. And where I want to start is by saying that I appreciate what this is doing much more after these last two watches. Being more versed in slasher and gialli, I can fully grasp what this is parodying. I grew up with like the Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and the Friday the 13th films. And I also had seen some of the one-offs here and there, but diving deeper, you see more of what they're poking fun at. I include gialli just because we have that murder mystery, like whodunit film. Also, being sleazy with the clientele, but this is definitely a slasher film. Now, with that set up, there are some things here that I noticed that pay homage to Friday the 13th Part 2 with the campfire scene to kind of tell this, like, backstory, horror story type thing. Then we also have a little bit of sleepaway camp here where we have adults at this resort. And even the burning with some of the stuff. Now, the setting is great since they're isolated and getting away isn't easy. It is funny, though, since the adults act like teenagers from movies in this subgenre. Setting this on an isolated island resort in a tropical climate gives them the freedom. It's also highly creative, and I'd go as far to say this uses it better than I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. It is also in line with the early Friday films with the older version of just counselors. Now, building off of that, we have a good slasher vibe despite being a comedy first. The killer mostly uses a machete, and it's even a funny backstory as to who it could be, as that weapon is in the name of that person. There's also some creative deaths here. They fall in line with a Coconut Pete song. They have built-in isolation, and cell phones are not working since it's an island that doesn't have service. There's also beautiful women and nudity to go along with it. The comedy is interesting because it is part parody, poking fun at the same films from the past that it's also paying homage to. There are also laughs because these guys at Broken Lizard are just great. They know what they're doing here and it works. That will take me then to filmmaking. A positive here is the cinematography to capture this island. It feels isolated and we have this backdrop of the jungle as well. I'll even pull in here the framing as it does help to hide the effects. From what I could see, they look to be done practically, which makes me smile. If they use CGI, my guess is it's there to enhance and it was hidden so it doesn't take me out of it. Credit to the team there. The soundtrack is fine. I'm not the biggest fan of this type of music, but Coconut Pete's songs are funny, especially if you know kind of a little bit about Jimmy Buffett. It fits what they needed. If there is a gripe, there's a slow burn and it runs too long. That fits the subgenre, I will say that. It never gets boring because we do get deaths at good intervals. Plus, we don't know who we can trust, and I even forgot who the killer was this time around, so credit to the movie for not being obvious with multiple watches. Let's end the discussion here by talking about the acting performances. The guys at Broken Lizard are all great. They're so good at embodying their character that they're playing and making them feel real. It is impressive, to be honest. I would assume that Lemmy was Hispanic if I hadn't seen him in other things, and he actually plays the character here of Juan, who is the dive instructor. Then we have Chandra Sakar, had an accent that he does in this film. He is portraying Putnam, who is the tennis instructor. Then, Paxton is great as that lead character. I bet he had a blast taking on this role. I would also say here that we have Paul Suter as Dave. He plays the DJ as well as the guy who gets drugs for everybody, and he is the nephew to the Coconut Pete character. You also have Eric Stolhansky, who is Sam. He's the fun police. There is Heffernan is Lars, who is the new masseuse that's coming to this island, so he becomes a immediate suspect for that. We have MC Gainey. He's solid here. It's nice also to see Elena Lyons, Tanya Reichert. We also have Brittany Daniel is in this film, and Jordan Ladd. Now, we get to see most of these ladies in different state of undress. I know at least topless, so that doesn't hurt either. The cast here is just solid across the board. So in conclusion, this is a good parody of slasher films while still being a horror film. It is a solid blend of both. What helps here is the writing and performances of the actors to make their characters seem like the killer. That kept me guessing, and even with seeing this multiple times, the setting of this island is a perk. I'd say that this is well made with the effects, cinematography, and framing leading the way. It is a slow burn that might run a little bit long, but we get deaths at good intervals, which helps. If you like the other films these guys have done, I'd give this one a viewing. I'd also recommend this to fans of slasher films as well. So my rating here for Club Dread is going to be a 7.5 out of 10, coming up half a point since the last time I've seen it. Then up next, I have one that's going to be a little bit light here because I have covered this recently, or at least on this podcast here in the last year or so, and that's going to be Strange Darling. This is from 2023, got its wide release here this year. This is written and directed by J.T. Molnar. The stars Willa Fitzgerald, Kyle Gallner, and Madison Beatty. This is an erotic, psychological horror thriller film that is from the United States. Currently sitting on a 7.1 on IMDb and a 3.5 on Letterboxd, with the synopsis being, nothing is what it seemed on this twisted one-night stand spirals into a serial killer's vicious murder spree. So this one, if you'd like to hear a featured review, is going to be on episode number 253, which is Phrase of the Floor is number 21. Had this paired up with Bluebeard, and that's kind of interesting is, now, Strange Darling is a little bit more on the sexuality side than Bluebeard, but I mean, there's also kind of elements there where he is killing, in that one, is is killing women, and this one kind of plays with those expectations. So I'll just say here that the two leads that we have, Fitzgerald is the lady, and then Gallner is the demon. What I like here, though, is this plays with expectations. We have this story that's not told linear. We jump in right in the middle of it, and then we jump back and forth, to the beginning to fill in backstory, and then we go to the present to kind of do some of these more wild things that are happening. So I actually heard some people kind of comparing this to, like, Tarantino with, like, Pulp Fiction. I get that for sure. We've also got some really good, like, lighting and cinematography. It's actually kind of interesting because I'm pretty sure Giovanni Ribisi, who voices a character, also did the cinematography. I think this might be his feature film debut there. That's kind of impressive to, be that good at what you're doing when you don't have a lot of experience with it. But then again, he's been working as an actor for a long time, so I can also get it. Again, I like how this plays with expectations here because we have, the character names and everything like that. Those get given to us in the very beginning of this. But then we kind of learn more that maybe not everybody is that they seem. They end up being like gray area here. And it's kind of interesting just because of things that happen in like reality and then what we're getting in this movie. I like what they do here with playing with who is who and who can you trust. I think the acting's great across the board. I mean, definitely our two leads are excellent in their own things there. Jason Patrick, that actor is the opening narrator. And then we also have a few other people here that are also very good in what they're doing. I'll kind of credit here to Ed Bagley Jr. and Barbara Hershey, kind of play two people that end up getting involved stuff. They're kind of a quirky older couple. Both great there. This is excellently made across the board. I think the cinematography is beautiful. I think how they kind of frame some of these shots and then what they do with the editing there is solid. We also get this really interesting thing here with the soundtrack where we have the song Love Hurts. It's actually in the world of the movie. I like what they use there because that actually kind of plays in a little bit more to the story. The rest of the soundtrack helps build the atmosphere. I'll say the effects here, we don't get a lot of them, and I'm pretty sure everything I saw was practical. If they had CGI, it was hidden very well. So I think this is a solid movie. I knew coming in that people said it was good, so it lived up to those expectations. How they presented the story was interesting and kept me engaged. The best part's the acting. Our two lead performers do an excellent job. This is also well made with the cinematography, framing, effects, and soundtrack. I'm glad that I didn't sleep on this one, and it definitely held up after that second watch. Wouldn't be shocked if this ends up in my top 10 at the end of the year. So my rating here for Strange Darling, 8.5 out of 10. And then since we had a Friday the 13th of this last week here, it's going to be Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, the next one in line that I have not reviewed yet. So this is from 1989, written and directed by Rob Hedden, and then it's also giving credit here to Victor Miller, who came up with the characters. This stars Jensen Deggett, Kane Hodder, and Scott Reeves. This is a dark comedy, slasher, supernatural, urban adventure, horror thriller film that is from a co-production of the United States and Canada. Currently sitting on a 4.5 on IMDb and a 2.1 on Letterboxd, or synopsis being, Jason Voorhees is accidentally awakened from his watery grave and ends up stalking a ship full of graduating high school students headed to Manhattan, New York. So this is one where we have Kane Hodder coming back as Jason. And this is one that I would watch a lot growing up. Along with the previous one, they always seem to be on the movie channels. It's interesting because I didn't have access to the other ones, and I didn't necessarily have the context, but I was still a fan. It wasn't until getting older and being more versed in horror that this became one of my least favorites. I have now given the Blu-ray a watch that came from the box set, on this whole series and everything, as I like to continue watching the ones, on Friday the 13th when they happen, so this was the next film up for review. So where I'm going to start is that I appreciate this one trying to do some things differently. I can see why the series started going downhill because of that. Part 7, The New Blood, introduced a supernatural angle, and this one is set mostly on a boat, even though it's supposed to be taking Manhattan. It ends in New York City with Vancouver being the stand-in for the real city. I'm a big fan of horror films that are set on the water like this, so that's terrifying that you can't easily get away. It confines the narrative while also being big enough for the characters to move around in. My issue here is that there are things that just don't make sense, and the character seems to be missing for me. Sticking with the positives, I do think we have an interesting enough group of characters. There are ones that we care about and ones who we're fine seeing die. This does feel like the people that I went to school with to an extent. My issue here is that, what was the number in the graduating class? I went to a small school that had 72 kids that I graduated with, or I was one of 72, but this one only seems to have like 10. Now, my wife is from a town in Ohio where she was telling me about the high schools on the nearby islands that have extremely low numbers of students. Going along with this idea, we don't have enough people or much of a crew on this giant ship. I know this is a movie, and it just doesn't seem... we're missing that realism. Let's then shift over to talk about the acting. I thought Daggett is solid as our lead. I'll also say that Reeves works as a male counterpart to her. We know that she is afraid of the water. Now, this shows us why later, and it also makes Charles even more of a villain, and that would be her uncle, who is also a chaperone, and he is portrayed by Peter Mark Richmond. He's great in that, jerk character there. Now, we also have Gordon Curry, Scott Reeves, as I was already saying, Saffron Henderson, Martin Cummings, Vincent Craig Dupree. There is also Charlene Martin and Kelly Hu. I think that they're all fine as these students that we know. Tamara is odd because he does try to extort Charles. I'm not fully sure if it makes sense, but she just graduated and is rich, so I can understand, making bad choices like that. Hodder is great as Jason. He does add personality to the character that is masked and doesn't speak. I'd also give credit here to this deckhand of Alex Daikun, who is our harbinger. The cast in general just kind of fits a slasher film like this. Let's then go ahead to go back to the story. I do have some issues with the character of Rennie, that's the lead character there, portrayed by Daggett. Now, she keeps seeing Jason as a boy. I don't know why in this. I know that she knows the story from her uncle, but that doesn't seem to go anywhere in my opinion. My guess is that they needed to correlate to what happens in the end, and that doesn't even make sense either. Saying that Jason taking Manhattan is a stretch. That is a good set piece, especially with the gang members they run into and just kind of seeing how dirty it is. We're still getting that 1970s, 1980s New York where it's almost a character on itself. Jason does seem to teleport a few times. My guess is that they're just assuming people would just roll with what we're getting here without thinking too deeply into it. We just have some odd choices like that especially what happens in a sewer as well. This just doesn't work. We just needed more care there. That was where my issue came from. All that's left then would be the rest of the filmmaking. I've already said that I love the major settings of the ship and New York City. They both add character for sure. Now, the cinematography also looks good. The framing helps there, especially with the kills. They went practical, which is a perk. We get some creative deaths here at times. My only gripe is where you drop a bunch of characters really fast and they were hiding in a specific room that just doesn't work. My guess is that they already were at 100 minutes, so they're cutting what they needed to. I do think it is too long, and being a slow burn doesn't help. We do get kills at good intervals, so that's a positive. I also think despite not using the theme, we get a great soundtrack here that works for me as well. I do love the theme song for this one. In conclusion, this is still my least favorite of the series. I'll be honest though, it isn't as bad as I remember it. The title is misleading, but I'm a fan of horror films set on a boat. We have a long runtime, but we do get kills at good interviews, so that is a positive. The acting fits to bring the characters to life. I thought that we had a good variety of kills and using different things. This is made well enough with the cinematography, framing, effects, and soundtrack. My biggest issue here is that it's just too long, and being a slow burn doesn't help. This is part of the reason that the Friday the 13th is my favorite of the slasher franchises, since even the worst installment, to me, is still solid and enjoyable. So my rating here for Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, is going to be a 6 out of 10. Then a documentary I got to check out here is going to be Dario Argento's World of Horror. It goes by the original title of Il Mondo del Oro di Dario Argento. This is from 1985. It was written and directed by Michele Soavi. Now this is starring Dario Argento, Romano Albani, and Fiora Argento. I think some of those are actually archive footage, but this is a biography documentary, and I consider this to be horror, as does, I believe, Letterboxd. This is from Italy, currently sitting on a 6.4 on IMDb and a 3.4 on Letterboxd, with a synopsis being documentary on horror mystery filmmaker Argento, features an in-depth interview with him and covers his work from 1969 to 1985. So this is one that I checked out while working. Hindsight there, probably wasn't the best one to check out while working, since this does feature interviews with Argento that are subtitled. That did make it difficult, where I needed to kind of pause to see some of the things that were being said. Regardless, this is one that I wanted to see and can finally take it off my list. So what we're getting here is an interesting doc that was done by Soavi. Now, he's a filmmaker that has worked with Argento as well as the likes of Lamberto Bava before going off on his own to make horror films, until he kind of switched to doing more TV work. This is interesting, covering Argento's career from 69 to 85, showing different behind the scenes of how shots were crafted. We also get to see how makeup as well as special effects were done, and explaining how these were able to be captured. As a massive fan of Argento, this was something fun to check out. So this isn't a definitive thing to watch or anything like that. It's quite short as well, but we're getting some brief overview, learning a bit more about the films and the career of Argento between this time frame. And it's also kind of fun to kind of hear his thoughts on some of the things and his stance, but not one that you need to go out of your way to see. It's more of just you're trying to knock everything about Argento out, or trying to see all of Soavi's filmography. So I still enjoyed this despite it being very kind of limited in what it does, but I gave Dario Argento's World of Horror a 7 out of 10. And that's all I have here for mini reviews, so let me go ahead and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
Boy, old sticky.
Fire.
Any lucky lady gonna get the midnight kiss?
Just talk to her, dude.
What's up, Laura?
We're actually going to this New Year's thing. It's gonna be a
total shit show.
Oh.
See ya.
It's 1999, and we getting drunk!
In a few hours, you have an excuse to kiss the girl of your dreams. Open up. Take us away. So smooth. Y2K is real.
Someone's on the net?
Dumbass. I use gel.
Oh, shit. A Tamagotchi just drilled through a chick's head.
Come on, we gotta go.
We are experiencing major problems as a result of the Y2K breakdown.
Bye-bye, human race.
We're talking global computer apocalypse.
Sorry, guys. I guess you're fucked.
They made a video and everything. That's crazy. You don't know how this shit works.
Grab a bike, grab a board, grab whatever you can.
This has been the shittiest night of my life. Fuck this! But it's cool that we got to hang out for once.
Oh my God! I get knocked down, but I get up again.
And for my first review here is going to be one that I actually didn't even realize was necessarily coming out, didn't know much about it, but I decided to check it out at the Gateway Film Center and figured I'd make it a featured review. And this is going to be Y2K. This is from 2024, directed by Kyle Mooney, who helped co-write this with Evan Winter. This stars Jaden Martell, Rachel Zegler, and Julian Dennison, while also featuring the likes of Daniel Zalgarhadre, Lachlan Watson, Fred Durst, Mooney, Eduardo Franco, Mason Gooding, The Kid Leroy, Lauren Ballone, Alicia Silverstone, Tim Heidecker, Maureen Sebastian, Miles Robbins, Ellie Ricker, Jacob Mostakovitz, and Daniel Dale. This is a artificial intelligence teen comedy horror sci-fi film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 5.2 on IMDb and a 3.0 on Letterboxd. Our synopsis being: two high school students who are nobodies make the decision to crash the last major celebration before the new millennium on New Year's Eve 1999. The night becomes even crazier than they could have ever dreamed when the clock strikes midnight. So this is one that I was saying, saw it was showing at the Gateway Film Center, figured out that it was horror, and saw that it checked into my, I could work it into my schedule, especially after seeing that it was a comedy horror film. Now that makes me a little bit leery just because I don't necessarily like that combination unless it's done well. So I kind of knew a little bit about that. You knew it was going to be kind of like a period piece type thing, which is actually when I was in junior high. So that kind of made me smile there. And then seeing that I had Jaden Martell, I was like, okay, and let's go ahead and check this one out. So let's do some featured notes then before I jump into the movie, and I'll start with our director of Mooney. This is his feature film debut, but he does have a short, and I believe he's worked on TV. I know he's probably done some stuff online because he is into comedy. So then as a writer, he has one other credit. This is the only one that he's done in horror. Now for his co-writer of Winter, this is their feature film debut. Now we have two assistant directors that I want to go back to here, and the first is Alice Johnson. They've done 18 films in one short. I've seen 2 of their works. They have 4 in genre. I've seen this and It Comes at Night. They also did False Positive and Master, which are both on my list to check out, just haven't yet. Now the other is David Ketterer Spencer, who has 5 credits. This is the first that I've seen. Has 2 in genre. The other one being John and the Hole from 2021, which I've never heard of that one. Let's look at the cast. First is Martell. He has been in 20 movies and 4 shorts. I've seen 6 of them. Not horror, he was in Knives Out, has 6 in genre, and I've seen 5. This includes It Chapters 1 and 2, The Lodge, and Arcadia. Now, I've not seen Mr. Harrigan's Phone, but it is on my list, and I've actually read the novella short story. I don't know, I'm not really sure which is which, but that was kind of an interesting premise, especially kind of plays on some of the things, well, it's written by Stephen King, so it plays on things he's done in the past and just kind of using technology there. Now, his co-star of Zegler has 9 films and 1 short, first I've seen, and that she's done in horror. Then last look at Dennison. He's done 11 features and 1 short. I've seen him in 3 things. Not horror, he was in Deadpool 2. He's actually the kid that Deadpool is after the whole time. I consider Godzilla vs. Kong to be in genre, but this is his only true horror film that he has done. So then let's look at this movie here. I'll start by saying that this wears on its sleeve that it takes place in 1999. Having been a junior high student at the time, it did make me smile with all the nods and homages. I do think this goes a little bit over the top. I do find it funny, though, that all the students weren't even alive yet, and I digress there. And actually, there's a little bit of trivia on the IMDb page about that, which actually kind of made me smile, is that out of the main cast, Gooding and Franco were alive during the events of the film. Gooding was 3 and Franco was 5. Now, Miles Robbins, who plays Nuggs, was 7. Then Zolgahadre was also born about a month after the film's event, so that's kind of interesting there, but I just wanted to go ahead and do that. So for this one, though, we're following Eli, portrayed by Martell. He has a crush on Laura, portrayed by Zegler. Now, she works for the school website as, like, it's a class. I actually took this in high school, so she has coder experience, which I don't. Now, Eli is kind of interested more so that she recently broke up with her boyfriend who attends a community college. I did want to point out here that his parents are Robin, portrayed by Silverstone, and Howard, portrayed by Heidecker. Now, Eli heads over to his best friend's house of Danny, who is portrayed by Dennison. So they're on winter break, and they've decided that they're going to try to figure out what they're going to do for New Year's Eve. They go to a local video store where we meet Garrett, who is portrayed by the co-writer and director Mooney. He invites them to the abandoned factory to hang out with his friends, who they kind of call themselves the Collective. Now, our duo also gets bullied by Farkas, which I'm assuming is a nod to A Christmas Story, and he's portrayed by Franco and his crew. This includes Ash, portrayed by Watson, who has a video camera, and they also hang out with CJ, who is portrayed by Zalgahedri. So their last stop before heading home is a convenience store where Laura and her crew show up. They bolt, though, as they steal beer. Now, these two go back to Danny's, and he goads Eli about going to the party. He finally snaps, breaks off the lock on a cabinet of alcohol, and they get drunk. This gives them the courage they need. Now, the party is at Soccer Chris's house. He is portrayed by the Kid Leroy, which I guess is a rapper from Australia. Didn't know that. We see that everyone, regardless of friend group, is in attendance. This is heartbreaking, is that Eli gets bullied by multiple people, including Danny, who doesn't realize what he's saying. He kind of gets caught up as he does this, like, dance thing, and everybody loves it. So it also hurts that Laura seems to be interested in Soccer Chris. Everything gets turned upside down when the power goes out at midnight. It does come back on, but once it does, they have a bigger problem with something else that has come to life. So let's leave my recap introduction of the characters. Now I want to start as somebody who doesn't watch trailers. I'm not sure how much they give away about the movie. I came in not knowing what type we'd get here, and just that it took place at the turn of the millennium. It made sense what we get here, so I'll be cryptic as possible. So I don't want anybody who's like me to, have anything ruined by listening to this. It does remind me of a combination of like a schlocky yet popular horror film from the 1980s. A name that I've already brought up in this might have been involved in that one as well. It also combines elements of Tetsuo the Iron Man and virtual reality. That's all I'm going to say here. Now that I have that set up, something that is interesting is that we're almost 25 plus years removed from Y2K. I remember it being a big deal, and it kind of just passed without an issue. Now, I was born in the late 80s, so I'm not sure if there were like patches or just something that it was overblown to help prevent a major issue that I'm just not aware of. But setting a movie in the past to, back when I was in junior high makes me feel old. Seeing programs like AOL Instant Messenger and whatnot makes me also feel that way. Now, it is fun to get the references. My only issue here is that they go over the top with it. Since I connected with so much, I overlook it due to nostalgia, and the comedy landed for me, so that's another thing that kind of helped there, but I can see people getting annoyed by this as well. So since I'm treading lightly to not spoil, what I will say about the villain. What they do is it involves technology, which makes sense. There's a virus of sorts that is affecting things with computer chips. I love this idea. It does get played at times for comedic value, but since this is a comedy horror, it does make sense. The biggest issue here is that I think they developed this. If they would have developed just a bit more and added more into the horror realm, I think this works better. Instead, it just kind of focuses more on the development of Eli to become the hero. That's probably my biggest gripe. With how they start this character, I understand why we need the arch that we do. It just went more on a local scale scale instead of more on a global. I also think it might have been too ambitious to try and difficult to kind of pull off going bigger. But I will shift over to say and discuss the acting performance here, since this is a character study of our lead. Martell works here as his character who might not have the highest self-esteem. He has one friend and a crush on Laura. He doesn't have the confidence, though. It is through this night that he develops, and that feels real. Ziegler was cute. I think she fits as this popular girl who was has more under the surface. That's what they needed for this movie. And I actually realized on the IMDb trivia as well is that Jenna Ortega was slated to star in this role, but due to scheduling conflicts, she had to leave. And it's kind of interesting because Ziegler does look very similar to her. So I could see either one of them in this movie. And I would say Ziegler was fine. Dennison works as Eli's best friend. He has a hilarious thing where he sings the thong song. I'd say that Zolhegdry, Watson, and Franco work as these stoner like reject kids. Mooney is hilarious in his cameo along with Silverstone, Heidecker, Gooding, and even Fred Durst when he shows up. I'll just leave this here and say that everyone makes the comedy work. All that's left then is filmmaking. I thought this was... It does make it feel like the 90s, and that worked. If anything, they just go over the top. Showing the scope of where the world is with what is happening, something that made me smile. I did like the practical effects. That was something I wanted more of. The blood looked good. There is CGI. Not all of it works, though. They didn't go over the top, so I will give them credit for that. They went as practical as they could from what I could see. Now, the music did make me also smile for fitting the era. This is also, back to probably not working for everybody. So then I'm not going to do anything. I don't have any more trivia to share. So in conclusion, I had a fun time with this one. Not one that you can really overanalyze. There is an interesting message here that is relative through this artificial intelligence concept. It is interesting to look at a story 25 plus years old, still kind of being relevant. Though that the acting worked, especially for the comedy aspects, the horror and story could be developed a bit more to make everything work better. This is made well enough, capturing the era and the practical effects, the soundtrack leading the way for sure. I don't think this will be one that everybody will enjoy, but for some reason this one just hit me and it worked so well. So my rating for Y2K is going to be a 7 out of 10. Not going to do a spoiler section. Don't necessarily think I need to do anything there outside of just kind of revealing things, so I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to go ahead and do, though, is get you over to the trailer of my second featured review.
At St. John's College, some students are not who they seem.
Hello.
Please don't do this.
I just met the two finest blonde goddesses.
Our room's right down the hall from yours.
Don't trust anyone.
Oh, you just bought yourself a shirt.
And be very careful what you wish for.
Bobby froze from the inside out.
No indication of a struggle.
I didn't kill Bobby. I did see something that was unbelievable. Her chest, it burst open, and then these black pussy snakes start whipping around.
Do you have any idea how insane you sound?
I broke his arm off.
So, man, who made you CSI New Brunswick, man?
I got a plan. Finally uncover them for who they truly are.
A hot alien with snake tits? Bet my badge that kid did it.
Cameras, man, conspiracies, and ass-kicking aliens from Hooter Planet. They love the cold, right? I'm solo on this witch hunt.
Please don't do this.
And nothing is gonna stand in my way.
I want to help.
Better late than never.
Decoys. They can seduce anyone. Pray it isn't you.
Want to get your groove on?
Sure.
TikTok.
And for my second featured review here is going to be Decoys. This is from 2004. It was directed by Matthew Hastings, who also co-wrote this with Tom Barry. Now this stars Corey Sevier, Kim Poirier, and Stephanie Von Feften. I think that's how you might pronounce that name. And this also features the likes of Elias Tofes, Megan Ori, Anis Esmer, Krista Moran, Mark Trottier, Carrie Kolick, Richard Berge, Nicole Eggert, Don Hastings, Sarah Smith, Leah Graham, Mike Lobel, Simon Peacock, Carl Claude, and Rosie Ida. Now, this is a teen horror sci-fi film that is from Canada, currently sitting on a 4.7 on IMDb and a 2.5 on Letterboxd, our synopsis being, Luke and Roger are just another couple of college guys trying to lose their virginity, but when Luke sees something unusual, he begins to suspect that the girls on campus aren't exactly human. Now, that's a little bit misleading, but what I'll say here is that Luke is portrayed by Sevier, and then we have Roger by Tofeix, and then I'd also say that I don't necessarily think Luke is a virgin, but this is a movie that I found when I was searching for winter horror films. This also doubled as a Foray Through the Floors, being from 2004, so it was enough to select as a feature review here on the podcast. So I'll be honest, I knew the rating, runtime, director, and year of release. Other than that, I came to this one blind. Did see the poster, I thought that looked pretty cool, a little bit misleading, but I mean, not necessarily misleading, but cool poster for a movie that I'll get into. So then, let's start here with some of the featured notes, and I'll start with our director here of Hastings. He's had 3 features, and this is the first that I've seen. Has one other one in genre with something called Bloodsuckers, which I'm assuming is a vampire film. He also co-wrote this, and he's done this for the same 3 films that he's directed. Then his co-writer is Barry. He's written 4 motion pictures, first that I've seen, only one that he's done in genre. Let's move to the cast. I'll start with Sevier, who looks to be still working, especially with like the Hallmark Christmas movies. He's been in 67 movies and 3 shorts. The top 3 of his that I've seen already actually are not in horror. He's done Tommy Boy and Immortals, where he was Apollo. Now he has done 8 in horror. Top 4 are Apartment 1303, which is on my list, House of Fears, Osambi, and the sequel to this film, Decoys 2, Alien Seduction. Those are the ones that I haven't seen yet. So then his co-star of Poirier has been in 15 features. First thing I've actually seen her in would have been the Dawn of the Dead remake. Now she was also actually that's the first time I would have saw her, and then I also saw her in American Psycho 2, and now this. The top 3 that I haven't in genre are The Rats, the sequel to this, and No Solicitors. Now the last person I will cover here is going to be Von Pefton. Now she's been in 37 films. I've seen her in 3 things. Not horror, I've seen Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief and 40 Days and 40 Nights. Her horror, she's done 4. First thing I've seen her in. Her others are Too Late to Say Goodbye, The Invitation, and Strange Frequency 2. Alright then, so let's jump into this movie here, and we are going to start with this cold opening, which is funny with a plot aspect to this movie. It appears to be Halloween. We see a guy who watches some children ring a doorbell and there's no answer. So he goes up to knock on the door, and it's like pretty much the same way. No one answers, and he peeks through the window, and where he ends up like seeing movement. He then knocks again and the door opens. He comes inside calling out and doesn't get an acknowledgement. What he does find is 2 guys both frozen to death. He originally thinks it's their costumes. When he learns the truth, though, he screams. It then shifts to St. John's College in New Brunswick, Canada. Luke and Roger go to the laundry room. They're annoyed by smokers for leaving the window open as it's winter. Roger offers a beer, which Luke declines, but does give in to peer pressure. They have fun while doing while they're doing this chore here. While Luke is still finishing up, he meets a pair of cousins. They're both attractive. Now we have Constance, portrayed by Poirier, and Lily by Von Pefton. Now, they flirt with him before leaving. Now, the 2 women also forget quarters. Luke takes them up to their room, but he finds them not in. So not into their room. So he sneaks in and leaves the quarters on their desk, but gets a little bit creepy here and decides that he's going to sniff a nightie that is hanging on the closet door. This proves problematic as the duo comes back, so he hides in the closet. He sees more than he's bargained for. They strip down naked to get into their pajamas, which that's not overly weird, but they do something while getting dressed. Constance sprays something over these tentacles that come out of a hole in Lily's chest. They end up leaving, allowing Luke to escape. So he goes back to his room to tell Roger what he saw. His roommate had already met the 2, and he's going to be taking Constance as his date to a party they're going to on the next night at a sorority, and it actually appears that they are members there. The 2 then go to a local diner, as in like the roommates here, and they end up meeting up with a couple other friends of Alex, portrayed by Ori, and Gibby, portrayed by Esmer. Now, the former has a crush on Luke, but he doesn't notice it. Neither of these friends believe Luke either. I mean, it is pretty wild. So they go to this party, and everyone's having a good time. Luke seems to forget what he saw, or he might be chalking it up that he was just drunk, as Lily is interested in him. That is until she is elected to represent the sorority as the Ice Queen, a local pageant that the school does. Now, she is brought on stage to meet with their houseboy, who is Bobby Johnson, and he's actually the captain of the hockey team. So these 2 go off to dance, and it upsets Luke. Bobby and him get into it, with Luke accidentally hitting another sister in the face. So he leaves in a rage. Now, Bobby goes off with Lily, and Luke goes to his Jeep to go on a ride or on a drive with Alex. Lily and Bobby hook up in the snow. This ends poorly for Bobby. The next morning, Detective Amanda Watts, who's portrayed by Eggert, visits Luke. He is taken to the crime scene where we meet Detective Francis Kirk, portrayed by Berge, who's leading the investigation. Luke is the prime suspect due to the fight that him and the victim had, gotten into, him leaving in a rage and being so close to the crime scene when it happened. It is unexplainable, though, as to how Bobby died. He looks to be frozen from the inside out, which doesn't make sense. Luke has to clear his name and convince everybody that there is something much darker going on here. So let's leave my recap and introduction of the story. Where I want to start is that we have some interesting... My recap went longer than I wanted. That's where I also want to start, but it's intriguing, though, since we have a simple story. Everything that I've given to you is really just to kind of set the stage, and then from there it gets a little bit repetitive with Luke trying to convince everybody what is happening. He does so in just creepy ways. More people then die off in a similar fashion. Now, they also try to connect the characters that I don't think we necessarily need. The basic premise is something that we've seen before, and I enjoy it. It just kind of falls short with the execution. So then... I know that I've already set this up, but let me delve a little bit deeper into the story. We get elements of a teen comedy where Luke and Roger are just trying to hook up with women. Like I was going back to, the synopsis says they're both virgins, but I don't think that's the case, as it's just the latter. These two are first-year students. Roger reminds me of my first year in the respect that I wanted to just drink and party. They're away from home for the first time and cutting loose. We do get this trope that nobody believes Luke, and I mean for good reason. When we first saw him, what he claimed he was drunk. He was also hiding in a closet. He does weird things from there to make him more of a suspect in these crimes, and that does kind of work for me because the more you try to do things like this, the more that it ends up kind of backfiring on you, and I can appreciate that. Let's then shift over to talk about these two women. It doesn't hide it for too long that they're aliens. My only issue is that when Luke kind of accuses them of doing things, they all but confirm it to him immediately after. That seems like a plot convenience, but I'll digress. Something that was interesting is that they need the cold. That explains why they're here in New Brunswick and why, up in Canada, and why the bodies are found in the state that they are in. This does use a classic trope that we've seen with alien stuff since the beginning in the subgenre of horror. It does get weird, and where it goes with Constance and Roger, I can enjoy it enough, just not the route that they would have gone. I do like having that there are these others who can't be trusted. Having them being good looking adds an element as well, especially since it makes Luke lower his guard and question things. So the last part of the story is this police investigation. I do like that it raises tension by forcing Luke to prove what is happening here. I mean, it's a classic thing in Gialli. Now, the only issue that I have here is there isn't much evidence against him aside from getting in a fight with the deceased and then being near the crime scene. It doesn't do great about looking at Lily as a suspect. This angle also disappears for a long stretch after Luke does weird things with cameras. For this to work better, it probably needed a bit more or just kind of lower it altogether. There's this odd aspect where Amanda the detective, supposedly, it seems like she hooked up with Luke. I have no idea why this was included. It doesn't do anything outside of the director and the writer just trying to make it seem like this guy's not as weird as he is because he did hook up with his police officer. Let's then shift over to discuss the acting performances. No one's great here, but they do fit a film with the budget they're working with. I do think that Sevier is fine as his first-year student who keeps digging the hole deeper as he tries to clear his name. This legitimately reminds me of myself at that age. Tophe is funny as well as his roommate, who also reminds me of things that I did at this age, especially, drinking early in the day and trying to be a bad influence to get other people to join me. Poirier and Von Feften are good looking. I do believe that we see both of them nude in various stages. Ori is quite cute. She's an interesting character as things go along. Esmer, Berge, and Eggert are fine in their roles. The rest of the cast kind of just rounds us out for what was needed. All that's left then, just for a little bit of trivia, is going to be filmmaking. Cinematography is fine. Doesn't do anything to hurt the product as well as not standing out. The same for the editing and framing. My gripe that I have here is with the CGI. That doesn't necessarily hold up. The tentacles and fast moving to flee rooms were problems. The practical effects were fine, especially with the look of the creature. We don't linger long, which is a credit there. There's a couple times where they use dreams or hallucination scares. Those don't work for me at all. Now the soundtrack is also fine without standing out. So then the little bit of trivia I have here is the building used as a dorm in the film isn't a dorm. It is at the University of Ottawa's theater department. U of O is the setting for most campus shots in the film. This is Poirier's first lead role in the film, Alexis Maitland's debut, and Melatha Blackthorn's debut as well. So then in conclusion, There are decent story elements and overall concept. The problem is that it becomes with execution. This uses tropes that we've seen before. Doesn't do enough for it to stand out, though. The acting was fine. No one was bad, in my opinion. A bright spot was how beautiful the actors are, and we were seeing the women nude. This also feels like it might be inspired by the film Species, to be honest. How this was made wasn't bad. The practical effects were good, but the rest were just decent with subpar CGI. Not one that I can recommend unless you like low budget cinema. So I like the horror mixed with your teen sex comedies. So my rating here for Decoys is going to be a 4.5 out of 10. So I'm not going to do a spoiler section. Don't necessarily think I need to do anything there. So let me go ahead and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Welcome to Review Set Scare with Jess and Blair. I'm Jess.
I'm Blair.
And we are two horror film enthusiasts with a podcast where we discuss the genre we love most, from 1978's horror classic Halloween to 1991's Ernest Scared Stupid. There is no horror movie we won't review. Find us on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts.
So remember to stay scary.
And eat every sandwich.
Bye, guys.
Hey.
And welcome back one last time here. And just to kind of go through my social medias and stuff, if you'd like to send me an email, you can send that at journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. You can send me any sort of feedback, or if you have any questions or anything, go ahead and shoot them there, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Or if you want to send me any screener links or anything like that, anything podcast related, you can send it via that way. If you'd like to read any of the written reviews, I'll direct you to Reviews of the Dead, and that's horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to become friends with me on Facebook, I'm David Michigan Garrett Jr. On Twitter, I'm Buckeye from Mish. Letterboxd, I'm David OSU. On Instagram, I'm David OSU87. On Threads, I'm David OSU87. And then Journey with a Cinephile has its own Instagram at Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. Now, all of these ones I will be sharing my ratings on, whatnot. I know for Letterboxd, all of the reviews are going to be for horror and non-horror alike. Instagram, I will be sharing over there is my different posters and everything for things that I'm reviewing. My personal account, you might see some personal pictures every now and then if I can remember to take them. And then, kind of same thing for Threads. And then Journey with a Cinephile is going to be more of just kind of posting podcast-related different stuff over there. And I'll also direct you to the Nightclub Discord channel, as I have a little section over there where we have some good conversations. I post all of my reviews and any new podcast episodes or some of the things I'm watching when I actually have time to post that. So keep an eye out over there, and I'll have the link for that and everything else in the show notes there. And then I'm also going to direct you, a way that you can actually listen to the show is going to be through the Pod Nation TV. This is a streaming service and everything like that. There will be a link in the blog posts for all of my episodes, so if you'd like to listen to it that way, it's kind of a cool little thing. You can definitely do that through Roku TV, and there's some other apps for it as well, just as another way for you to consume this podcast if you decide to. There's also a lot of other great shows that are on that network as well. And for my next episode is going to be the last one that I'm going to be doing for this year of these winter, end of year roundup type things. And the feature reviews I'm going to be checking out, I believe this is from 1984, of Don't Open Until Christmas. This is a film that I have not seen, Christmas themed, obviously, since we're coming closer to that holiday. I'm also going to be pairing this up with Apartment 2A. This is one I've been wanting to see since I heard that it came out. I'm a big fan of Rosemary's Baby, so I'm kind of curious to see what this prequel will, provide for me here, even though I haven't heard the greatest things about it. I'm also going to try to go to the Gateway Film Center to check out Black Christmas, the OG from 1974. If I don't, I'll watch it at home, so that'll be the mini review. That'll be the Fray Through the Forge rewatch that I do there. I'm also going to be doing some more of the 2024 rewatches. I'm going to shoot for Low Life, might be one that I'll actually feature on that episode. And then I'm also going to be watching from 1944, Outlaw Trail. This one was listed for horror for a little bit. It's a Western, I know that much, so I'm going to try to do that. I also have some screeners that I need to kind of start working in a little bit more of. So I don't think there's anything else I need to do here then for this outro, except saying thank you so much for listening, whatever you do today. Hope you're safe and doing have a great time out there. This is your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., and I am signing off.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending